Good evening and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics. We've got a great show lined up for you tonight. We've got a guest coming on a little bit later, but let's talk about what's happened this week, shall we? Let's begin right at the top and talk about COP26. That's right. This is the conference where politicians get together to discuss how they're going to change the world and change the planet. Yet, all they come up with is change your boiler costing you between 10 to 18 grand. They'll chuck you 5 grand. You've got to find the rest. And of course, we all have to cycle and jump into electric cars that nobody can afford. Yes, welcome to COP26, where elite politicians from around the world will actually emit so much carbon emission from their flights, private jets and their cars. We've seen Joe Sleepy Biden coming over with about 85 cars. Why on God's green earth does he need 85 cars? I mean, it's just crazy. And they're lecturing us, the little people. Yes, get it right. Us, the little people, that we need to cut our carbon emissions. How very nice of them. In fact, I'd call it the biggest hypocritical theatre and pantomime I think I've ever witnessed. And we'll see the same again at COP27, COP28. And let's be honest, what have been the outcomes? The biggest two polluters, although America were there, are China. China's the biggest. China's not interested. They don't care. They're going to keep burning fossil fuels as long as we keep buying their goods. Because as the UK government has already said, we need to trade with China. We can't sanction them because, of course, that would affect our imports, exports and trade. Well, look, at the end of the day, you have to cut your cloth. You have to make a decision. Do we have principles and do we stand by them? And I would say, certainly from my perspective, that, you know, when people say, I want to keep the planet green, I want to look after the planet and keep all that kind of stuff. And yet, if you look around your house, even you people from insular Britain, listen to me, look around your house. I guarantee you, you've got goods made in China. Yes, that's right. And of course, they're the biggest polluter. And of course, we've heard that China and the US announced a climate pact. They're going to come together with some kind of targets. I mean, it's all about targets at this COP26. And the outcome is going to be just a talking shop. And on this occasion, the schoolgirl, well, she's 18 now, Greta Thunberg, I actually agree with her. What I don't agree with is people gluing their heads to roads and blocking ambulances and workers on the M25. They're just complete lunatics. There we are. I've said it. So what else has been happening this week? Well, we've seen that the NHS and social care in particular is going to be under huge pressure because as of this week, if you've not been vaccinated and you work in social care, you can no longer work in that sector. Okay, there's not a shortage, of course. We don't need any more workers. We've overwhelmed with them, so we're okay, I suppose. No, not really. This is going to create a even further crisis in our social care system. It is abhorrent, it is discrimination, and it is wrong, and it shouldn't be happening. And we've heard stories all across social media this week of people's terrible, sad news and stories, how they've been in a job for 10, 15, 20 years, and now they're facing the sack. That's what this government is doing. It's tyrannical, it's authoritarian, it doesn't really give a toss about us, the little people. And of course, the government now is talking about introducing it to NHS workers, frontline workers and NHS workers here in the spring. It's interesting that they worked all through the pandemic before we found the vaccine, but now all of a sudden they have to have it or they might lose their jobs. That's coming in the spring as well to the NHS near you. What else has been happening? Well, we've seen total hypocrisy once again from politicians. Geoffrey Cox, the MP, earned £6 million from a second job. I don't know what your thoughts are on MPs having second jobs. I kind of don't mind it too much. If you're a doctor and you've been practicing and then you get elected as a member of parliament and you need to divide your time, I can understand that. You know, if you're a lawyer or if you're practicing or, you know, if you're a vet or something like that, I get that. But the idea that politicians are paid 80 grand plus whatever it is, their in Westminster these, plus their expenses, plus their second home, plus their travel, plus their hotels, plus a COP26, they get all that and then they get second jobs. Should they have second jobs? The issue for me is not over them having a second job. It's when they use their power and their position to lobby and get money from companies on their behalf. To me, that is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. Yeah, that's right. Geoffrey Cox, £6 million from a second job. Hey, it's good if you can get the work, isn't it? And I'm going to finish off my time with you today talking about the protest down in Cardiff this week. And many of you would have seen on mainstream media that the Welsh government have now decided under Drakeford Emperor, that's what I call him, the Emperor down at Cardiff Bay, has decided that he wants the hospitality industry eventually, at the moment, it's cinemas, theatres and concerts. To enter those places, you have to show a vaccine passport. They call them passes, but it's a passport. That's what it is. Let's call it what it is. Or you can take a lateral flow test, which be honest, you can give to your dog, swab your dog, and it comes up negative and you can get in with that. So it's just a waste of time. But the idea of introducing these things to me, I've always said this, is pure discrimination, because it sets two people in society apart from each other. It pits brother against sister, family against families. And I've seen this division already creeping into our schools. I'm hearing stories of children that are on the play yard and they're bullying each other over certain medical interventions they may or may not have. I mean, what kind of a society have we allowed this government and these politicians to get us into? The vote went through on a technical issue the first time, when one member of the Senate, Gareth Davis, a member for the Conservative Party, couldn't get into the hybrid voting and vote. What a complete and utter shambles. It has changed society in Wales, not for the good, but for the bad. The impact it's going to have on businesses is huge. But listen, let's have a look at the moments that matter in the chamber, in the Senate here in Wales this week when they voted through vaccine passports.
First of all, I think it's probably worth pointing out that we know that this virus spreads in confined spaces when people spend a lot of time there. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. So there's plenty of evidence to support that. And that is what we're suggesting and why we're keeping this restricted to those areas. And I make no apologies for proposing this restriction when rates are so high and we are just entering our winter period. And we don't make these decisions lightly. We know that we're in a situation where our NHS is really struggling at the moment, and we have over 800 people in hospital with COVID. And anything we can do to try and alleviate the situation and the pressure on the NHS at this point is something that we need to consider very seriously. And you'll be here next week complaining about how we can't get people into hospitals. Well, this is a measure to enable us to get fewer people in hospitals. Now, experts tell us that we should go early, and they tell us that every little contribution adds to our ability to contain what is a deadly virus. And it's no surprise that the evidence is still building. This is a new virus, and it's constantly changing.
They were the scenes this week here in Wales, in the Welsh Parliament, as politicians decided that they know best, and somehow they think that the vaccine passport is going to stop the spread of COVID-19, which of course there's no evidence, scientific or medical or otherwise, out there that it does, because you can still transmit it if you've had the vaccine, and you can transmit it, of course, if you haven't. So what's a vaccine passport going to achieve? Absolutely nothing, other than division in society, discriminating against parts of society, excluding people from social activities and events and places they wish to go voluntary. They can't go there anymore because the government have decided that they want to control us. That's what it's all about. Well, we're going to speak to somebody in a few moments who's going to come on to talk about the protest. I was involved with the protest on Tuesday outside the Senate with hundreds of people that gathered to make their voices heard. Check out some of these scenes.
The impact that this will have on society will be huge. And given this current government's form, it will be irreversible. It will segregate, marginalise and exclude people from parts of society based on their medical status. And we are here today to say no, because we believe in freedoms. Our freedoms do not belong to politicians, governments or institutions. They are ours. They are our God-given right, not handed to us by politicians.
Well, joining me now to discuss all of this is the founder for Open for All and a signatory for the Together Declaration and a key figure at that protest, and a good friend of mine. He is a Londoner, but we'll forgive him for that. He does struggle to understand my accent. We did have problems, Alan, didn't we? Alan, welcome to Rich Politics.
Oh, thank you very much for having me here.
That's great, mate. Alan, listen, you were there on that vote on Tuesday. It was an absolute shambles when what we're seeing happening in Wales. I mean, what do you make of it all, mate?
Well, I think it's a really terrible moment. I think on the one hand, the first vote should never have gone through. There was this technical hitch and it was 28 to 27. It was actually really 28 to 28. Apparently a week later, a vote was counted in the same circumstances. Like, what's happening at the Senate? That's one question. The second thing is that, what we've seen is a real contempt, I think, for the people of Wales, for businesses, for the public, for a sense of what civil liberties mean, what freedom represents. The idea that you impose upon a nation and on people, show me your health papers, some of the most intimate areas of people's lives, security guards and others like that should be forced to have to do that, is so antithetical to what, the United Kingdom is about, to what our whole notion of freedom and liberties, all the things that people fought and died for. And the contempt of that just being imposed, particularly at this point, where we now see what we're seeing, right? We're seeing both in Wales, the numbers really decreasing, but also across the UK. But, quite frankly, even the discussion about numbers is a difficult conversation, because it's often about testing. And now we're seeing that the numbers are often much younger people who the risk is very low to. They can get high immunity once they've had it. So this narrative, this discussion, this fear-driven discussion that then leads to restrictions and impositions is really very, very wrong. And the fact that it's being pursued and continued rigorously says much more about the people in the Senate and elected representatives who are just imposing things, right, on their constituents and others than it does about anything to do with health.
We'll talk about the Senate in a moment, but we did speak to one of the Welsh Conservative guys, James Evans. He came out, the member for Brecon and Radnorshire there. He came out and spoke to you on camera. So fair play. There are some people, 15 voted against it. So it's not like it's a done deal in that sense. There is opposition to this here in Wales, and of course in the public sphere as well. I mean, I think it's crazy that politicians can come up with these draconian measures that are going to have a huge impact on businesses, not just our civil liberties and our social liberties. And when you consider as well, the kind of speakers that we had on that day at that protest, Alan, that were part of the Together Declaration, we had business owners, we had mothers, we had people who've been affected, in all kinds of ways, didn't we? So it affects everybody, doesn't it?
Absolutely affects everyone. And it's right. I mean, when James Evans came out, it was really great to hear him talk and to say that he did not want to see a two-tier society and that it was really reprehensible.
Well, before you go on, let's just show our viewers that clip. Just watch this right now.
Right, we're here outside the Senedd, which is the Welsh Parliament, and there's about to be a vote. They're currently discussing it on whether to extend certification vaccine passports to other venues. There was already been a vote to go to some places. What do you think about that?
Well, the problem is with vaccine passes that we hear in Wales, it's creating a two-tiered society. That's not what we want. It's taking away people's freedoms. That's not what I stand for as a Conservative and other people in this country. We want our rights back. When things like this come in, they're very rarely repealed. So that's why people like myself are really fighting that, to make sure that we get people's rights in this country restored to them, not taken away. Unlike what this socialist government behind us wants to do, taking away people's rights, making people have vaccine passes, not right, creating that two-tiered society, which I don't want to see, and all the people who are coming here don't want to see either.
It's very encouraging. I mean, I'd like to ask you how you think the vote's going to go, but you're absolutely right about the two-tier society. We've just seen, I was in New York recently. You have to have vaccine passes to go in anywhere now. Restaurants, bars, the city that never sleeps. It's a real outrage. And then across the world, we're seeing everywhere from Victoria in Australia to places like Canada, and then all across Europe, Italy and France. What happens if the vote goes that way today? What kind of message do you think that sends?
Well, if the vote goes through today, it's just entrenching that two-tiered society. It's the vaxxed and the unvaxxed. That's a person's personal choice. I'm double vaccinated, but that's a personal choice I made. But we shouldn't be vilifying people who don't want to make that choice. And if that vote goes through today, it's going to exclude those people from vast parts of our society. And when we start excluding people from society, it sets a very dangerous precedent, which we do not want to go down as a country. That's my personal opinion on it. But let's make sure that we get this vote overturned today, and the Plaid Cymru do the honourable thing and actually stand up against this government rather than backing them, which they're hoping probably going to do today.
Yeah, so Al, he was saying there about the two-tiered society. I mean, that's what it's ultimately going to create.
Yeah, the idea that you have segregation based on a choice of some kind of medical treatment is so abhorrent And it's completely irrational. I mean, at one level, let's look at the rationality of it. As Boris Johnson has said, you can be vaccinated and it will very likely reduce your very, very serious symptoms and the likelihood of death. And particularly for vulnerable groups, that's really important, and that's a good thing. However, what it does not do, it does not stop you transmitting it. And equally, you can not have had the vaccination and have had COVID and have really high immunity. So if you want it to protect you and you make that choice, which, let's be honest, a significant majority of people in Britain have done, that's fine. You've done that. You've made your choice. If you've happened to have had COVID, and some people who are vaccinated have had COVID as well, obviously, but if you've had COVID, you have high immunity. This has nothing to do with passports, have no bearing whatsoever on that. So that's the kind of health discussion when people say it's about keeping safe and being responsible. No, it's not. It's got nothing to do with that, right? Utterly ridiculous. Nothing to do with it now. We now know that. What it has got to do with is imposing more measures and restrictions on businesses, on licensed premises. It's about separating families and friends and colleagues, getting them to be in, you either are welcome or you are not welcome, on an entirely flawed notion, right? It's utterly outrageous. We don't do it for STDs. We don't do it for other areas. I don't want to say these things because then you think, well, the impulse is then, well, that's a good idea, and we'll start doing it for STD. And as it happens, we know that the first draft of the app did have a lot of those things on there, and like, you know, criminal records, alleged criminal records, all sorts of things, ethnicity. Why is it that we are now, like the point is, and this is what was so inspiring about being in Cardiff, as you say, there were so many different people there, leaders of different political parties, people from business, you know, wives, mothers, fathers, professionals, a range of people, from lawyers to kind of campaigners. But why is it that many think that they can just impose these measures and that somehow that's just acceptable? Where is the debate around the efficacy of it? Where is the discussion about why it might be needed or not? What we've seen is, and to be honest, this has not just been in the lockdown, but it's been put on steroids in the lockdown, is that for the last 15 years or so, a lot of policymakers have been, when in doubt, regulate. So rather than coming up with solutions or having a discussion with the public and treating us seriously and try and win hearts and minds, and we see the same thing with mandating vaccines, rather than having a discussion winning hearts and minds, the impulse is to impose and to regulate. Either nudge on the one hand, and if the nudge and the threats don't work, then we'll just put impositions on there. And I really would encourage your audience and to actually have their voices heard and say something about this, because that can only continue when the public is not vocal and saying anything. It stops like that the second they are.
Yeah, we're going to come to that because I want to talk about the Together Declaration because it's so important, and I've been kind of helping you guys as an ambassador for it here in Wales. We want to create chapters around the country of freedom thinking and loving people like ourselves who just feel our voices have been ignored, because we're stronger together. We know that. Over 120,000 signatures so far, from MPs in Westminster down to, you know, MSs here, and, you know, hundreds of thousands of people that need to get on board with this. We want to do something here in Wales, create these chapters across North and South Wales as well, Mid Wales, not forgetting you Mid Walians. We'll do that as well. I mean, just tell us in a kind of concise moment, what is the Together Declaration all about? What are its pillars? What are the principles of it?
Well, the Together Declaration is very simply saying that we should have no certification, no show me your health ID papers to actually go anywhere. So you shouldn't have a digital app to have to get access, whether it's a theatre or a restaurant or a live venue or a bar or a club, none of those places. That they're unnecessary, they're illiberal, and they're wrong. And that we want not to be a two-tier society. We want to be together with people. We want to be with our friends and also people that we don't know. And that we want to be able to enjoy that, and that we never agreed to do some kind of exchange or trade to say, right, now we're going to jettison freedoms that people fought and died for. So in a nutshell, the Together Declaration is saying we don't want any of those things in any places around the UK. Together itself, more broadly, has 7 key pillars of areas that it's concerned about. And basically, it's a number of campaigns. So campaigns across the UK, professionals, as you said, members of Parliament, members of Senate, professionals and campaigners and organisers, and members of the public. And we want many more to join. But the 7 pillars of the areas of our work, and one is obviously the vaccine passport, saying no to them. One is that we need to have open debate, free speech, right? Robust discussions about these issues. How can you even have science, right, without free speech? How can you, the whole idea of contesting ideas, anything from Galileo to Copernicus, those ideas were very, very offensive to many people at the time. You have to be able to have a robust discussion and shine the light on those things. It sanitizes things when you shine a light on them. Stop mass testing. There's no reason for mass testing, particularly children at schools, right? Stop it. That's one of the reasons why the UK, compared to Europe and other places, look like it has so many cases. What we're seeing is, for a variety of reasons, that they're tests of people, right? So the mass testing is not required, right? So stop that. End emergency measures. Don't need the Coronavirus Act got renewed. If we remember talking about contempt.
Yeah, we did. Well, we remember the Deputy Speaker there was just laughed it off. There was hardly anybody in the Houses of Parliament, in the House of Commons, and yet they just laughed with contempt. I mean, and this is quite serious because, as you say, it impinges on our social civil liberties. They're using these powers. And for me, it's too much power for an individual to have. At a strike of a pen, they can lock us down again, because that's still there. They still have the powers to do that. It's crazy, isn't it?
It is indeed. I mean, obviously, they did originally use the Public Health Act to do it, and that needs to be changed and updated so that you can have proper scrutiny and risk assessments. And people like Steve Baker in Westminster have argued that case, and I think it's a very strong point that we need to recognise. But equally, you're 100% right. The idea that we have emergency measures at this point is utterly wrong, and the contempt and the disdain which they laughed it through and just nodded it on. Was just really, really infuriating and shows what we're up against, really.
Yeah. Right, Al, so listen, how can people, find out about the Together Declaration? Give us the website, how people can get involved and what they should do. Yeah,
so you can go to togetherdeclaration.org. So if you go to togetherdeclaration.org, there you can basically fill out your details. We've got postcodes for people around the United Kingdom. So basically what we're aiming to do, and what we've begun to do in many areas, I'll give you an example, like in Brighton, Sussex, we have organised where people have gone and spoken to their MPs and said they're going to be voting on the basis of what their MP does. And they're going to vote for someone who's opposing this. Now, when they're your local MP or member of Senate, when you go to them, particularly, and meet them at the surgery, but even write to them and phone them, and ask them about their position and follow it through, and don't just accept a generic email, but chase it down and keep speaking to them. When they know that a certain amount of people, and really that number is over about 100, once you start getting over 100 people saying that, and we have on average already about 150 people per constituency in the UK, we need to go and do that, right? That's one of the things that's really important. In Sussex, they were doing that, and it had a really important impact. And we've been doing it in a range of different areas. We're actually heading up to do an event today in Merseyside, in New Brighton, in the Wirral, where we have a number of speakers. But equally, they've got local groups that are meeting. They're meeting every Wednesday, talking about these issues, saying they want to be together. Why cafes and restaurants and nightclubs? Why are these things being proposed? They're really wrong, as well as some of the other areas. And that's really it would be fantastic, as you say, if that can happen in Wales, across different areas, in communities where we can have our voices heard, and we can't just be silenced. You see, one of the things is that we know that only very few broadcasters have actually engaged in these kind of discussions, right, as we've gone through it. So unlike something like Brexit, whatever anyone thought about it, whatever side you were on, whatever, at least that was discussed very importantly, and you had to have both sides of the argument everywhere, right? And people could make their minds up and listen to them and discuss and argue. And, that was a very important political time, right? We have not seen that. What we've seen actually is Ofcom have a number of rules that have meant it's avoided and restricted having that public debate in a proper way. So obviously you're doing great work, and having platforms like this is really important, but it's also really crucial that we can get as many people as possible all engaging, posting, sharing, saying things in their local papers, writing. Why are we not having these discussions? Local radio and nationally. Let the mainstream media hear from people. Say, I want to know on the BBC why some of these things are not being discussed in this way. BBC Wales were invited to come to the protest. They did not respond. We spoke to them. We sent them emails. ITV Wales did want to come, did respond to us, did engage with us. They were not allowed to leave the Senate. They were locked in. Right? That's a very point. Like some of the members of the Senate who are either not allowed in or not allowed out, or weren't allowed back in to vote. And this whole idea that you to be frightened or treat contemptuously or treat dangerously citizens and members of constituents that you allegedly represent, right, and you are there to, is so abhorrent. And the idea of a public debate with free speech and the press, that's restricted. So this is the way that we're going to do it. We're going to have people that are in constituents letting their representatives know. Also, to make sure that our voices are heard, we're using lots of social media and amplifying all of that, and everyone together, right, all around the country, doing that much more in that way.
Well, there we go, folks. You've heard it from the man himself, the director of Open for All. And of course, don't forget to head over to the togetherdeclaration.org. In the last segment of our show tonight, I want to speak about immigration. Yes, that big I word that lots of people are afraid to talk about because we get called fascist, racist, and all other kinds of stuff. But we're not. Let's look at it like this. We have record numbers of immigrants come into our country right now, more in the last 6 to 9 days than we've had in the whole of 2019. No mainstream media is covering it. There are a number of people like Nigel Farage, for example, on GB News, who is constantly reminding us of what's going on. We've seen footage, as you see come on the screen now, of these boats coming over with so many migrants coming in, slipping through the net, not being deported when they're over here illegally. I mean, you can understand why, if you lived in a tour-worn country, they'd want to come here and we'll give them refuge. Absolutely. Asylum seekers need to be taken care of. But they're not coming from a war-torn country. They're coming from blooming France. And we're paying France to protect the borders. I mean, it's just not working, is it? No government's been able to plug that hole. And Priti Patel, well, I'll let you make your own mind up about her. But look, we need to address the situation. There's an elephant in the room that many people don't want to talk about because it's associated with all kinds of different things. But look, the reality is it has to stop. Look what's happening here in Poland, for example. You know, they got border control. They got police there. You can't come in. It's illegal. It is a crime for you to come into this country. And you can't do it unless you follow due process and you go through the right channels. And so we need a stronger government, a government that doesn't just use words, but stands by what it says and implements legislation that puts police forces right on the border to stop it from happening. Because I feel sad for these immigrants coming over here because they're looking for a better life. I've often argued with people that the case might be said that if I was one of them, if I lived in a country where there was a lot of poverty and I was fearful for my life or there was persecution, then of course I'd want to go somewhere where I felt safe, where I could provide for my family. So I've got sympathy. I get that, because if I was in their predicament, I'll do the same. But we as a country are so tolerant and loving, and we're not an evil country. We're not a racist country. We are British. I'm Welsh British, of course, British Welsh, whatever you want to call it. Flags behind me there. But look, we care about people. We genuinely do. But we mustn't allow ourselves to be abused by the system that isn't working, and that has to be dealt with. So we need to get tough. Remember Brexit? Yes, that B word. Let's take back control of our money, our laws, and our borders. On this one, the government is failing. Well, that's it for me this week. You're on Rich Politics. It's Friday night. Hope you enjoyed watching. Don't forget to share the broadcast as many as you can. Hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you next week here on Rich Politics. Bye for now.